When most people think of Greek mythology, they picture Mount Olympus. They see Zeus on his throne, Athena with her spear, Poseidon making waves. But those gods came later. They were the second generation. Before them, before everything we think we know, they were the Titans. And their story is darker, stranger, and more violent than anything that came after. Imagine nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness in the way you think of it. Just nothing. The Greeks called this chaos. It wasn't a mess or disorder. It was a void, a gap, a nothingness so complete that it didn't even have space or time. From this nothingness came the first things. Not gods yet, not really. Just forces. Pure, raw existence taking shape. First came Gaia, the earth. Not dirt and rocks, but the entire planet given form and consciousness. She was vast, patient, and powerful beyond measure. Everything solid, everything you could stand on, that was Gaia. Then came Tartarus, the deepest pit imaginable, darker than any cave, deeper than any ocean, a prison beneath the earth where the worst things would eventually be thrown. Then came Eros, not the chubby baby with arrows you see on Valentine's cards. This was older, stranger. Eros was the force of attraction, of creation, of things coming together. Without Eros, nothing would ever join, nothing would ever be made. After them came Nyx, the night, wrapped in shadows so thick even chaos stepped back. And Erebus, the darkness of the underworld itself. But we're here for the Titans. And to understand them, you need to understand their parents, Gaia and Uranus, earth and sky. Gaia, lying there as the foundation of everything, decided she needed a companion. So from her own body, she created Uranus. The sky, he stretched above her like a dome, covered in stars, holding back the void. He became both her son and her husband. And yes, that's weird, but this is mythology. Things get weird. From their union came 3 types of children. First were the Cyclopes, giant beings with one eye in the center of their foreheads. There were 3 of them, Brontes, Sterops, and Arges. They were strong, skilled, and would later forge weapons that could shake the world. Next came the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones, 3 brothers, each with 50 heads and 100 arms. Their names were Cotus, Briareus, and Gydes. They were massive, terrifying, and incredibly powerful. And finally came the Titans, 12 of them, 6 sons and 6 daughters. These would be the ones to change everything. Uranus looked at his children and felt fear. The Cyclopes were too strong. The Hecatonchires were too monstrous. He couldn't stand looking at them. So he took these children, these powerful beings, and he shoved them back into Gaia's body. He imprisoned them in Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, where they couldn't threaten him. Gaia was in agony. She had given birth to these children, loved them, and now they were trapped inside her, causing her constant pain. She groaned under the weight. She suffered, and slowly her suffering turned to rage. She went to her Titan children, the 12 who were still free, and she made them an offer. She created a weapon from her own substance, a sickle, sharp as hatred, hard as stone. She held it out and asked a simple question. Which of you will help me? One by one, they refused. They were afraid of their father. Uranus was the sky itself. He covered everything. How do you fight something that vast? But the youngest son stepped forward. His name was Cronus, and he wasn't afraid. Cronus, the Titan of time and harvest. Cronus was the youngest of the 12 Titans, but he was also the smartest and the most ambitious. When his mother Gaia held out that sickle and asked for a volunteer, his brothers stayed silent. They were scared. Uranus was their father, yes, but he was also the god of the sky. He was everywhere. How do you attack something that covers the entire world? Cronus didn't hesitate. He took the sickle, and he waited. Gaia told him the plan. Every night, Uranus descended from the sky to lie with Gaia, to cover the earth in darkness. It was during these moments that Uranus was vulnerable, stretched out, exposed. That's when Cronus would strike. So when night came and Uranus lowered himself down, spreading across the earth like a blanket, Cronus was ready. He hid in the shadows, weapon in hand. And when Uranus was at his most vulnerable, Cronus swung. He castrated his father, cut away his manhood with one clean strike. Uranus screamed. The sky itself howled in pain. He pulled back, retreating upward, and he never came down to touch the earth again. From that moment on, sky and earth were separated. Uranus remained above, distant and cold, while Gaia stayed below. The blood from Uranus's wound fell in drops. Where it hit the earth, new beings were born. The Furies sprang up. 3 sisters dressed in black, with snakes in their hair and blood in their eyes. They would become the spirits of vengeance, hunting down anyone who broke an oath or murdered their family. You couldn't escape the Furies. They would follow you forever. The giants were born too. Huge, powerful beings with strength that rivaled the gods themselves. They would cause trouble later, and the Malaya came into existence. Ash tree nymphs, gentle and kind, living in the forests. But the strangest birth came from the severe genitals themselves. Cronus threw them into the sea. They floated on the waves, and white foam gathered around them. From that foam, a goddess emerged. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, born from an act of violence. She stepped onto the shore at Cyprus, fully grown, radiating beauty so intense that flowers bloomed where she walked. With Uranus defeated and gone, Cronus became the new ruler. His brothers and sisters, the other Titans, recognized his strength and his courage. They accepted him as their king. And Cronus, now holding all the power in the universe, began to build his reign. He married his sister Rhea. This wasn't unusual for gods. The Titans didn't have a lot of options, and in mythology, the rules were different. Rhea was the Titan goddess of fertility and motherhood. She was gentle, patient, and deeply loyal to her husband. Together, they ruled what later Greeks would call the Golden Age. This was a time before humans struggled, before winter killed crops, before war and sickness. Cronus governed with a steady hand. Harvests were abundant. The earth gave freely. There were no seasons yet. Everything just grew. But there was a problem. A secret Cronus carried in his heart like a stone. Before Uranus had fled to the sky, he had cursed his son. He had whispered a prophecy. Just as you overthrew me, one of your own children will overthrow you. Cronus heard those words, and they burned into his mind. He had betrayed his father, yes, but he had done it to free his siblings, to stop the suffering. Or at least, that's what he told himself. Deep down, he knew the truth. He had done it for power. And now that same power was threatened. Rhea began to have children. First came Hestia, a daughter. Cronus looked at the baby, and all he could think about was the prophecy. So he did the unthinkable. He swallowed her whole. Rhea screamed. She begged. She pleaded. But Cronus didn't listen. He swallowed the child, and she disappeared into the darkness of his belly, alive but trapped. Then came Demeter, another daughter. Cronus swallowed her too. Then Hera, swallowed. Then Hades, swallowed. Then Poseidon, swallowed. 5 children, and Cronus devoured them all. Not because he hated them, not because he was evil, but because he was afraid. Afraid of losing his throne, afraid of the prophecy, afraid of becoming like his father. Rhea was heartbroken. She had carried these children, loved them, and watched her husband consume them one by one. When she became pregnant for the 6th time, she knew she had to do something different. She went to Gaia, her mother, and asked for help. Gaia, who had suffered under Uranus and now suffered watching her grandson repeat the same cruelty, agreed. Together, they made a plan. When Rhea gave birth to her 6th child, a son named Zeus, she didn't bring him to Cronus. Instead, she hid the baby in a cave on the island of Crete. She wrapped a large stone in blankets and brought that to her husband. Cronus, not even bothering to look closely, swallowed the stone. He thought he had one. He thought the prophecy was defeated. 6 children, all trapped inside him, unable to grow, unable to threaten his rule. But Zeus was alive, hidden, growing strong in secret, and one day he would return. Cronus ruled for what the poets called an age. Time moved differently then. It wasn't measured in years, but in the rise and fall of powers. During his reign, the world was peaceful on the surface, but underneath, in the belly of the king, 5 gods waited in darkness. Cronus believed he was safe. He believed he had outsmarted fate. But you can't outsmart fate. The Greeks knew this better than anyone. Fate isn't something you avoid. It's something that finds you, no matter how clever you think you are. The Titans supported Cronus. They built their own kingdoms, their own domains. They ruled alongside him, each one managing a different part of the cosmos. And as long as Cronus sat on the throne, the Golden Age continued. But golden things don't last forever, especially when they're built on fear and violence. Cronus had taken power through betrayal, and he would lose it the same way. His story is a warning. It tells us that power taken by force will always be taken by force again. That fathers and sons are locked in a cycle, each one overthrowing the last, each one afraid of the next. Cronus was a god, yes. He controlled time, ruled the harvest, governed the cosmos, but he was also a prisoner of his own fear, and that fear would be his downfall. Rhea, the mother of gods. Rhea doesn't always get the attention she deserves. When people talk about Greek mythology, they focus on Zeus, on Cronus, on the wars and the heroes. But Rhea is the heart of the story. She's the mother who suffered, who lost, and who ultimately saved the future. Her name means flow in Greek, and that's what she represented. The flow of generations, the flow of time, the flow of life from mother to child. She was the goddess of fertility and motherhood, but not in a soft, gentle way. Her motherhood was tested in the worst way imaginable. Imagine being Rhea. You're married to the king of the universe. You live in a golden age where everything grows, where peace reigns, where the world is perfect. And then you have a child. You hold that baby in your arms. You feel the warmth, the weight, the little movements. You love this child more than anything. and then your husband takes the baby from you and swallows it whole. You scream, you cry, you beg. Nothing works. The child is gone, lost inside the belly of the god you married. And then it happens again, and again, and again. 5 times, 5 children, 5 losses, 5 moments of absolute helplessness. Most people would break. Most people would give up, accept that this is how things are, that there's no fighting against a god. But Rhea didn't break. She got angry, and she got smart. When she became pregnant with Zeus, she knew she couldn't let it happen again. She went to Gaia, her mother, the earth itself. Gaia had already helped overthrow one terrible father. She would help overthrow another. Together, they planned in secret. Rhea would give birth in hiding. She would take the baby far away, somewhere Cronus would never think to look. And she would trick her husband into thinking the child was gone. The island of Crete became the hiding place. In a cave on Mount Ida, surrounded by forest and protected by warriors called the Curetes, Rhea gave birth to Zeus. The baby was strong, loud, healthy, everything a mother could hope for, but she couldn't keep him. Not yet. So she left him in the care of others. A goat named Amalthea nursed him. The Curetes danced and clashed their shields whenever the baby cried, drowning out the sound so Cronus wouldn't hear. Rhea took a large stone and wrapped it in cloth, bundling it like an infant. She brought it to Cronus and said, "Here is your son." Cronus, so confident in his power, so certain that he had one, didn't even look. He grabbed the bundle and swallowed it whole. The stone dropped into his belly alongside his 5 children. And Rhea, standing there, watched her husband and said nothing. She had learned from her mother. She had learned from the past. Sometimes you can't fight power directly. Sometimes you have to be patient. Sometimes you have to wait. Years passed. Zeus grew strong in his hiding place. He learned about the world, about his father's crimes, about his siblings trapped in darkness. And when he was ready, when he had become powerful enough, he returned. But that's Zeus's story. Right now, we're talking about Rhea. After Zeus overthrew Cronus and freed his siblings, Rhea finally had her children back. All 6 of them, grown, powerful, grateful. They had been inside their father for so long, unable to age, unable to die, just waiting. And when they emerged, they saw their mother for the first time since infancy. Rhea didn't ask for power. She didn't demand a throne or recognition. She had done what mothers do. She had protected her child. She had endured suffering. She had made the hard choices. In later myths, Rhea is often confused with Cybele, another mother goddess. She was worshipped quietly, in small rituals, by women who understood what it meant to love something you might lose. She represented the strength of mothers, the patience required to raise children in a dangerous world. She watched as her children became the new gods, the Olympians. She watched as they divided the world among themselves. She watched as they made the same mistakes their father had made, fighting over power, betraying each other, causing pain. But she also watched them grow, build, create. Zeus became king. Hera became queen. Poseidon took the seas. Hades took the underworld. Demeter brought the harvest. Hestia kept the hearth fires burning. And through it all, Rhea remained. Not on a throne, not demanding worship, but there, a reminder that before power, before war, before glory, there was family. There was a mother who refused to let her children be destroyed. Her story is quieter than the others. There are no epic battles in Rhea's tale, no monsters slain, no grand quests. But in many ways, her story is the most important. Because without Rhea, there would be no Zeus, no Olympians, no future. She saved the world by saving one child. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Oceanus, the titan of the oceans. Water covered most of the world in ancient Greek thought. Not just the Mediterranean Sea, but all water everywhere. Rivers, streams, lakes, and the vast ocean that circled the entire earth like a ribbon. And all of that water had a god. His name was Oceanus. Oceanus was the eldest son of Uranus and Gaia, the firstborn Titan. When his brothers and sisters emerged into the world, he was already there, vast and powerful, flowing around everything. The Greeks didn't think of the ocean the way we do today. They didn't know about the Atlantic or Pacific. To them, the ocean was a single enormous river that wrapped around the edge of the world. Beyond that river was nothing. Mystery, chaos, the unknown. Oceanus was that river. His body was the water itself. Every stream that fed into the sea was part of him. Every wave that crashed on shore was his movement. He was everywhere water existed. He married his sister Tethys, the tightness of fresh water. Together they had thousands of children. Not an exaggeration. Thousands. 3,000 sons, called the Potamoi river gods. Each river in the world had its own deity, its own personality. The Nile, the Tigris, the Danube, all of them were children of Oceanus. And he had 3,000 daughters called the Oceanus. These were the nymphs of springs, fountains, streams, and clouds. Beautiful, immortal, and tied to the water in all its forms. Some of them became important in later myths. Metis, who Zeus swallowed. Styx, who became the river of the underworld. Doris, who married Nereus and gave birth to the 50 sea nymphs, called Nereids. Oceanus was different from his brothers. While Cronus plotted and schemed, while the other titans fought for power, Oceanus stayed neutral. He didn't join the rebellion against Uranus. He didn't fight in the war between the Titans and the Olympians. Why? Because Oceanus understood something the others didn't. He understood that some things are eternal. Water doesn't care who sits on the throne. Rivers keep flowing. Oceans keep moving. The tides don't stop because gods are fighting. When Cronus overthrew Uranus, Oceanus accepted it. When Zeus overthrew Cronus, Oceanus accepted that too. He didn't fight on either side. He just kept doing what he had always done, flowing. This made him wise. The Greeks saw wisdom in water. It adapts. It finds a way through. It carves through stone given enough time. Oceanus had that same patient power. He lived at the edge of the world, where the sun rose in the east and set in the west. Some stories say the sun god Helios sailed across Oceanus every night in a golden cup, floating from west to east to rise again. Oceanus allowed this. He allowed many things. His palace was beneath the waves, deep and quiet. His wife Tethys ruled beside him, gentle and nurturing. Their children spread across the world, bringing fresh water to every land, making life possible. Without Oceanus, there would be no rivers, no rain, no springs bubbling up from the earth. The land would be dry, dead, lifeless. He was essential, even if he didn't demand recognition for it. Later, when humans began to sail, they prayed to Oceanus. They asked him for safe passage, for calm waters, for mercy, because the ocean could be generous, but it could also be cruel. A storm could rise in minutes. A wave could swallow a ship whole. Oceanus gave, and he took away. The Greeks respected him, but also feared him. The ocean was a boundary. It marked the edge of civilization. Beyond it lay monsters, strange lands, danger. To sail too far was to risk everything. Oceanus never left his domain. While other titans climbed Mount Olympus or walked among mortals, he stayed in the deep. He had no need for politics, for power plays, for the games the other gods loved. He represents something important in Greek mythology. Not all power is loud. Not all strength is violent. Sometimes power is just being constant, reliable, essential. Oceanus was the foundation. Without him, nothing else worked. And even after the Olympians took over, even after Zeus claimed the sky and Poseidon claimed the seas, Oceanus remained. Because you can change rulers, you can overthrow kings, but you can't change water. It flows whether you want it to or not. His story doesn't have drama. He doesn't fight, doesn't scheme, doesn't fall in love with mortals or interfere in human affairs. He just exists. And that existence is enough. In a world of violent gods and tragic heroes, Oceanus is the calm, the steady rhythm beneath all the chaos, the reminder that some things are bigger than war, bigger than power, bigger than even the gods themselves. Tethys, the titan of fresh water. If Oceanus was the vast ocean circling the world, Tethys was every drop of fresh water within it. She was the tightness of rivers, streams, springs, and fountains. She made life possible. Tethys married her brother Oceanus, and together they ruled all the water in the world. But while Oceanus represented the salt water, the endless sea, Tethys was the water you could drink, the water that crops needed, the water that animals gathered around at dawn. She was a nurturer, a mother on an impossible scale. With Oceanus, she gave birth to the 3,000 Potamoi and the 3,000 Nurchnids, 6,000 children, each one a river, a stream, a spring, or a cloud. Think about what that means. Every river you've ever heard of, every stream that runs through a forest, every fountain in a town square, those were her children. She gave birth to the Nile, the longest river in the world. She gave birth to the Danube, flowing through Europe, the Ganges, sacred in distant lands. All of them came from Tethys. Her daughters, the Oceanids, were just as important. They became nymphs, beautiful and immortal, tied to specific places. Some lived in springs where travelers would stop to drink. Others lived in clouds, bringing rain. They were everywhere, invisible but essential. A few of her daughters became famous. Metis, the Oceanid of wisdom, became Zeus's first wife before he swallowed her. Styx, another daughter, became the river of the underworld that gods swore oaths upon. Doris married Nereus and gave birth to the 50 Nereids, sea nymphs who helped sailors and blessed fishermen. But most of Tethys's children weren't famous. They were quiet, working behind the scenes, keeping the world alive. A spring in a desert, a stream in a forest, a fountain in a village. These weren't grand or dramatic, but they mattered. Tethys herself didn't appear in many myths. She wasn't involved in the wars between gods. She didn't take sides when Cronus fought Uranus, or when Zeus fought Cronus. Like her husband, she remained neutral, focused on her work. And her work was vital. Fresh water is life. You can't drink salt water. You can't grow crops with it. You can't survive without fresh water. Tethys provided that, every day, every moment, without thanks, without worship, without glory. The Greeks understood this. They built shrines near springs and rivers. They left offerings, small tokens of gratitude. A coin, a flower, a prayer. They knew that water was a gift, and gifts came from the gods. Tethys was also associated with nursing and raising children. Not just her own thousands of offspring, but others too. In some myths, she helped raise Hera, keeping the future queen of the gods safe during the war between the Titans and Olympians. She was a protector, a guardian, someone you could trust. Her name might come from an ancient word meaning grandmother or nurse. That fits. She had the patience of someone who had seen everything, the kindness of someone who understood suffering, and the strength of someone who kept going no matter what. She didn't need to fight. She didn't need to conquer. Her power was in giving, in providing, in making sure that life could continue. Imagine the ancient world without her. No rivers means no civilizations. Humans built their first cities along rivers. Egypt rose along the Nile. Mesopotamia grew between the Tigris and Euphrates. Greece itself relied on small rivers and springs scattered across rocky land. Without Tethys, none of that happens. The land stays dry. Nothing grows. No one survives. She was the quiet goddess, the one you didn't notice until she was gone. And the Greeks, living in a hot, dry climate where water was precious, noticed. They honored her in small ways, personal ways. A farmer would pour water on the ground before planting, thanking Tethys. A mother would wash her child in a stream, asking for health and protection. A traveler would drink from a spring and whisper a prayer. These weren't grand ceremonies. There were no massive temples to Tethys, no festivals in her name. But she was present in daily life in a way most gods weren't. After the Olympians took power, Tethys and Oceanus stepped back. They didn't rule anymore, didn't sit on thrones or issue commands, but they didn't disappear either. The rivers kept flowing, the springs kept bubbling up, the rain kept falling. Because gods might change, but water doesn't. It's constant, reliable, essential. Tethys represents something beautiful in mythology. She's the reminder that not all power is dramatic, not all strength is violent. Some gods don't need to shout or fight or demand attention. They just do their work, quietly, day after day, making life possible. In a world of thunder and war, Tethys is the gentle rain, the cool stream, the sweet water that keeps you alive. And that, in the end, might be the most powerful thing of all. Hyperion, the Titan of light. Before the sun and moon, before dawn painted the sky, there was Hyperion. His name means the one who goes above, or the High One. He was the Titan of light itself, not the specific lights we see, but the concept of illumination. The idea that darkness could be pushed back. Hyperion was one of the 4 Titan brothers who held their father Uranus down, while Cronus castrated him. Each brother represented one of the 4 cosmic pillars that held heaven and earth apart. Hyperion was the pillar of the east, where light first breaks through darkness every morning. He married his sister Thea, the Titaness of sight and brightness. Their union made perfect sense. Light needs something to shine upon, and sight needs light to see. Together, they created a family that would light up the entire sky. They had 3 children, and these children became some of the most important gods in Greek mythology. First was Helios, the sun, not a ball of gas like we understand today, but a god who drove a golden chariot across the sky every single day. He rose in the east, traveled overhead, and set in the west. His light was warm, life-giving, essential. Farmers prayed to Helios. Travelers used him to navigate. He saw everything that happened under his light, which made him a god of truth and oaths. Second was Selene the moon. She was beautiful, gentle, and mysterious. While her brother blazed across the day, she glided through the night in a silver chariot pulled by white horses. Her light was softer, cooler, but no less important. Sailors navigated by her. Lovers met under her glow. She represented the night that wasn't dark, the time when you could still see, still move, still live. Third was Eos, the dawn. She was rosy-fingered, saffron-robed, eternally young. Every morning she opened the gates of heaven and rode across the sky in her chariot, announcing her brother Helios. Her light was pink and gold, the gentle transition from Selene's night to Helios's day. She brought hope, a new beginning, the promise that darkness always ends. These three children of Hyperion lit the world, day, night, and the moments between. Without them, there would only be blackness, no growth, no life, no time. Hyperion himself didn't do much in the myths. He wasn't a warrior or a schemer. He didn't interfere in human affairs. But his presence was always there, in the light that filled the sky, in the warmth that made crops grow, in the ability to see and understand the world. The Greeks associated him with watchfulness and observation. Light reveals. It shows what's hidden in darkness. Hyperion, as the Titan of light, was the original revealer. Nothing could hide from light. When the war came between the Titans and the Olympians, Hyperion fought on the side of Cronus. He and his brothers stood together, trying to maintain the old order, but they lost. After the war, Zeus cast most of the Titans into Tartarus, the deepest prison in the universe. Hyperion went with them, locked away in darkness. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Titan of light, imprisoned in a place where no light reached. But his children remained. Helios continued to drive the sun across the sky. Selene kept lighting the night. Eos still announced every dawn. The light didn't die just because Hyperion was gone. Later myths sometimes confused Hyperion with Helios, calling both of them sun gods, but they were different. Helios was the sun itself. Hyperion was the concept of light, the power that made the sun possible. Think of it this way. Helios was the lamp. Hyperion was the electricity. One was specific, the other was fundamental. Hyperion's importance lies not in what he did, but in what he made possible. Without light, there's no distinction between things. Everything blurs together. You can't see, can't understand, can't create. Light allows for knowledge. It allows for art. It allows for civilization. The Greeks understood this. They built their cities in sunlight, conducted their business during the day, and feared the dark. Hyperion gave them the tool to push back that fear. Through his children, through the sun and moon and dawn, he made the world livable. In some ways, Hyperion represents enlightenment itself, not just physical light, but mental clarity, the ability to see truth, to understand reality, to distinguish between what is and what isn't. This is why the Greeks valued him, even if they didn't tell many stories about him. He was foundational, assumed, always present but rarely discussed, like breathing or gravity. After his imprisonment, his legacy continued through his children and grandchildren. Helios had many children, including Circe, the sorceress, and Phaethon, who tried to drive the sun chariot and nearly destroyed the world. Selene had 50 daughters, who represented the 50 lunar months between Olympic Games. Eos had children who became the winds and the stars. All of that came from Hyperion, the Titan who stood in the east and held up the heavens, the god who made sure light existed. His story is a reminder that some gods don't need adventure or drama. Some gods are important simply because of what they represent, and what could be more important than light? Without Hyperion, the world would be dark, cold, dead. But because of him, because of his children, every morning the sun rises. Every night the moon glows. Every dawn brings hope. And that's enough. Thea, the tightness of sight and radiance. Thea's name means divine or goddess. Simple but powerful. She was the tightness of sight, of the blue sky, of everything that shimmers and shines. Gold, silver, jewels, anything that catches the light and reflects it back, that was Thea's domain. She married Hyperion, the Titan of light, and together they created the celestial lights. But Thea was more than just Hyperion's wife. She had her own power, her own importance. Think about what sight means. It's not just eyes. It's perception, understanding, the ability to take in the world and make sense of it. Thea gave that gift. She made it possible to not just have light, but to see it, to use it, to benefit from it. The Greeks believed that sight happened when light from the eyes met light from the sun. It wasn't passive. You didn't just receive images. Your eyes sent out their own light, and where that light touched things, you saw them. They had governed that process. She was the bridge between light and vision. She was also associated with precious metals and gems. Gold glimmers, silver shines, diamonds catch the light and throw it back in 1,000 colors. These weren't just valuable because humans decided they were. They were valuable because they held Thea's essence. They captured light and held it. This is why queens and kings wore gold crowns. Why temples were decorated with precious metals. Why victories were celebrated with golden wreaths. Gold was divine. It was Thea's gift. She had 3 children with Hyperion, and each one inherited her radiance. Helios, the sun, blazed across the sky. His light was so bright that humans couldn't look directly at him. Selene, the moon, glowed with a softer, reflected light, but still beautiful and bright. Eos, the dawn, painted the sky in gold and pink every morning. All 3 of them got their beauty, their brightness, from their mother. They didn't appear in many myths. Like Oceanus and Tethys, she worked quietly, behind the scenes. But her influence was everywhere. Every time something shone, every time light danced on water or glinted off metal, that was Dea. The Greeks sometimes called her Euryphieza, which means wide-shining. She was vast, her light touching everything. You couldn't escape it. Even in shadow, her influence remained, because shadow only exists where light has been blocked. She represented glory too, not the glory of war or victory in battle, but the glory of beauty, the glory of something so stunning it takes your breath away. A sunset, a clear blue sky, the stars. These moments of pure visual beauty that was Thea's domain. When temples were built to honor the gods, they were decorated with gold and precious stones. Not just because these materials were expensive, but because they honored Thea. They brought her light into the sacred space. After the war between the Titans and Olympians, Thea's fate is unclear. Some stories say she was imprisoned in Tartarus with the other Titans. Others say she was spared because her children were too important. Without Helios, Selene, and Eos, the world would have no light at all. Most likely, she faded into the background. Her children took over her duties. They became the faces of light, while she became the forgotten source. But even forgotten, she remained essential. Because every sunrise, every moonrise, every glimpse of gold or silver or the deep blue sky, that was there. She didn't need worship or temples. She had the entire visible world as her monument. The Greeks understood that some gods are too fundamental to tell stories about. You don't tell stories about air or gravity. They just are. They was like that. She was sight. She was light. She was beauty. And in a world that could be dark and harsh and cruel, beauty mattered. It reminded people that life wasn't just struggle. There was wonder too. There was glory. They gave them that. Every single day. Iapetus, the Titan of mortality. Iapetus was the Titan of mortality. Not death itself, but the mortal lifespan. The idea that things begin and end, that nothing lasts forever. In a world of immortal gods, he represented the opposite. He was the reminder that some things must die. His name might come from an ancient word meaning piercer or wounder. That fits. Mortality is a wound. It's the thing that makes life painful and precious at the same time. Iapetus was one of the 4 brothers who held down Uranus during the castration. He represented the pillar of the west, where the sun sets, where light dies every evening. The west was associated with endings, with the unknown, with the land of the dead. He married Clymene, an Oceanid daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. Together they had 4 sons, and these sons would become some of the most important figures in Greek mythology. Not because they were powerful gods, but because they interacted with humanity in ways the other Titans never did. The first son was Atlas. You probably know his name. He's the Titan condemned to hold up the sky for eternity. But before his punishment, Atlas was a warrior, a leader, a powerful force. When the war between the Titans and Olympians came, Atlas led the Titan armies. He fought harder than anyone, leading the charge against Zeus and his siblings. He lost, and Zeus, never one to forget an insult, punished him in the worst way possible. He didn't kill Atlas. He didn't imprison him in Tartarus. Instead, he made Atlas stand at the western edge of the world and hold up the sky on his shoulders. Forever. No rest. No relief. Just endless weight, endless burden, endless pain. Later myths sometimes say Atlas held up the earth, but that's not right. He held the sky. He kept heaven and earth apart, doing the job that the 4 cosmic pillars once did. He became the pillar, turned into a living punishment. The second son was Prometheus. His name means forethought. He could see the future, not perfectly, but enough to make good guesses. Prometheus loved humanity, not in a distant, godly way, but genuinely. He saw humans struggling, weak and vulnerable, and he wanted to help them. The gods had forbidden humans from having fire. Fire meant warmth, light, cooking, metalworking, civilization. Without fire, humans lived like animals. Prometheus thought this was cruel. So he stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. Zeus was furious. Prometheus had defied him, broken the rules, elevated humans beyond their proper place. So Zeus punished him. He chained Prometheus to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains. Every day, an eagle flew down and ate his liver. Every night, the liver grew back. Every day, the eagle returned. This went on for thousands of years. Prometheus screaming in agony over and over, while the eagle tore into him. Eventually, Heracles killed the eagle and freed Prometheus. But that's much later in the story. Prometheus represents something important. He's the Titan who sided with humanity over the gods. He suffered for it, but he didn't regret it. He believed humans deserved better. And because of him, civilization was possible. The third son was Epimetheus. His name means afterthought. He was Prometheus's opposite. Where Prometheus planned ahead, Epimetheus acted first and thought later. Where Prometheus was careful, Epimetheus was impulsive. This became a problem when Zeus sent Pandora to Earth. She was the first woman created by the gods as a punishment for Prometheus's theft of fire. She was beautiful, charming, and carried a jar that she was told never to open. Prometheus warned his brother, "Don't accept gifts from Zeus. Don't trust this woman." But Epimetheus, true to his nature, didn't listen. He fell in love with Pandora immediately. He married her. He welcomed her into his home. And then Pandora, driven by curiosity, opened the jar. All the evils of the world spilled out. Disease, old age, pain, sorrow, envy, greed, everything that makes human life difficult. They spread across the earth like smoke, infecting everyone. Only one thing remained in the jar: hope. Tiny, fragile, but still there. Epimetheus represents the consequences of not thinking ahead. His impulsiveness brought suffering to all humanity, but it also brought hope, because without Pandora, without the jar, humans would have lived forever in a kind of innocent emptiness. Now they had suffering, yes, but also the drive to overcome it, the need to build, to improve, to hope for better. The fourth son was Mythology. He doesn't appear much in the myths. What we know is that he was violent, arrogant, and reckless. During the war between the Titans and Olympians, he fought on the Titan's side. Zeus struck him down with a lightning bolt and sent him to Tartarus. That's it. His story is short and brutal. But together, these four sons tell us everything about Iapetus. Atlas represents endless burden. Prometheus represents sacrifice for others. Epimetheus represents mistakes and consequences. Mythology represents arrogance, punished. All of these are aspects of mortality. Life is a burden. We sacrifice for those we love. We make mistakes. We sometimes act with arrogance and pay for it. Iapetus, as the Titan of mortality, fathered children who embodied these truths. Iapetus himself fought in the war against the Olympians. He lost, like most of the Titans, and was imprisoned in Tartarus. Deep underground, far from light, locked away forever. But his legacy lived on through his sons. Through Atlas, still holding up the sky. Through Prometheus, who became a symbol of rebellion and human progress. Through Epimetheus and Pandora, whose story explained why life is hard. Through Mythology, a cautionary tale about pride. Iapetus teaches us that mortality isn't just about dying. It's about how we live. It's about the weight we carry, the choices we make, the sacrifices we endure, the mistakes we regret. It's about being human, even when you're a god. The Greeks looked at Iapetus and his family and saw themselves not immortal, not perfect, but struggling, trying, hoping. And that's what made his story matter. Cronus, the titan of constellations. Cronus is one of the most mysterious titans. We don't have many stories about him. No great myths, no dramatic moments. But his name and his children tell us what he represented. He was the titan of constellations, of the stars that wheel across the night sky, of the celestial order that ancient people used to measure time. His name in Greek is Krios, which means ram. This connects him to the constellation Aries, the ram. He was associated with the south, one of the four cosmic pillars that held heaven and earth apart. While his brothers represented east, west, and north, Cronus stood in the south, watching the stars turn above him. The Greeks looked at the night sky and saw order. The stars moved in patterns. They rose and set at predictable times. Sailors navigated by them. Farmers planted crops based on their positions. The stars were a calendar, a compass, a clock. Cronus governed that order. He made sure the constellations appeared when they should, that the patterns remained consistent, that the heavens didn't descend into chaos. He married Eurybia, a sea goddess, daughter of Pontus and Gaia. She represented the mastery of the sea, the power of ocean currents and tides. Together, Cronus and Eurybia connected the sky and sea, the two vast unknowns that ancient people feared and respected. They had 3 sons, and these sons became important gods in their own right. The first was Astraeus, whose name means starry one. He became the titan god of stars, planets, and astrology. He married Eos, the dawn, daughter of Hyperion and Thea. Their children were the winds, Boreas, the north wind, Notus, the south wind, Zephyrus, the west wind, Eurus, the east wind. They also had the stars themselves as children, each star a living being with its own personality. Astraeus represented the connection between the stars and the weather. The Greeks noticed that certain stars appeared when seasons changed, when storms came, when winds shifted. Astraeus governed those connections. The second son was Pallas. Not much is known about him, but he married Styx, the oceanid who became the river of the underworld. Together they had children who represented key aspects of power and struggle. Nike, the goddess of victory. Kratos, the personification of strength. Bia, the personification of force. And Zealous, the personification of zeal. These children fought on Zeus's side during the war against the Titans. Styx was the first to pledge her support to Zeus, bringing her children with her. Because of this, Zeus honored her. He made her river the one that gods swore their most sacred oaths upon. To swear by the river Styx was to bind yourself completely. Even Zeus couldn't break an oath made on Styx. The third son was Perses. He became the Titan god of destruction, but not random chaos. He represented the necessary destruction that makes way for new things. Old forests burn so new growth can emerge. Old systems collapse so new ones can form. Perses governed that process. He married Asteria, another Titaness, and they had a daughter named Hecate. She would become one of the most important goddesses in Greek religion, ruling over magic, crossroads, and the night. But that's a story for another time. Cronus himself didn't do much in the myths. When the war came between Titans and Olympians, he fought on the Titan side. He was defeated and imprisoned in Tartarus, along with most of his brothers. But his children and grandchildren shaped the world. The winds that sailors relied on came from Astræus. The victory that armies sought came from Nike. The strength that heroes needed came from Cronus. The force that moved mountains came from Baiae. All of this traced back to Cronus, the quiet Titan who watched the stars and made sure they kept turning. The Greeks needed to believe in cosmic order. They needed to know that the stars would rise and set, that the seasons would change, that the universe followed rules. Cronus represented that belief. He was the assurance that chaos wouldn't win, that patterns would hold. In a world where so much was unpredictable, where storms could destroy your crops, where disease could kill your family, where war could take everything, the stars were constant. Every night they appeared. Every season the same constellations returned. Cronus made that happen. He held the southern pillar of heaven. He kept the celestial sphere turning. He made sure the universe worked the way it should. His story reminds us that not every god needs to be dramatic. Some gods work quietly, doing essential tasks that nobody notices until they stop. The stars will always turn. The constellations will always appear. Because Cronus is there, holding up his corner of the sky. Even from Tartarus, even imprisoned and defeated, his influence remains. Look up at night, see the stars. That's Cronus's legacy. That's his gift. Order in the darkness, light in the void. Patterns that never change. Zeus, the Titan of intellect. Zeus was the Titan of intellect. Not wisdom, which is different. Not knowledge, which is accumulated facts, but intellect. The ability to think, to question, to understand complex ideas. He represented the rational mind, the capacity for abstract thought. His name might come from an ancient word meaning query or question. That fits perfectly. Intellect is about asking why, about digging deeper, about not accepting simple answers. Like his brothers, Zeus was one of the four who held down Uranus during the castration. He represented the pillar of the north, the axis around which the heavens rotated. The north was associated with cold, with stillness, with the unchanging pole star that sailors used to navigate. Zeus married his sister Phoebe, the tightness of prophecy. Together they represented two ways of knowing. Zeus represented rational thought, logic, the intellect that builds arguments and solves problems. Phoebe represented intuition, prophecy, the knowledge that comes from beyond reason. Their marriage was the union of reason and intuition, logic and insight, the conscious mind and the unconscious. Together they could understand everything. They had 2 daughters, and both became incredibly important. The first was Leto. She was beautiful, gentle, and kind. She caught the attention of Zeus, who slept with her. This made Hera, Zeus's wife, furious. Hera cursed Leto, forbidding any land from giving her a place to give birth. Leto wandered the earth, pregnant and suffering, while Hera hunted her. Finally, she found the floating island of Delos, which wasn't technically land, so Hera's curse didn't apply. There, Leto gave birth to twins. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, and Apollo, the god of light, music, prophecy, and healing. These 2 would become major Olympian gods. Apollo especially would inherit his grandfather's intellect. He became the god of reason, of logic, of rational thought. He established the oracle at Delphi, where he spoke prophecies. He represented everything Ku stood for, but in a new generation. The second daughter was Asteria. She was the tightness of falling stars and nocturnal prophecy. Zeus wanted her to, but unlike her sister, Asteria refused him. To escape his advances, she transformed into a quail and threw herself into the sea. She became the island of Delos, the same island where her sister would later give birth. Asteria married Perses and gave birth to Hecate, the goddess of magic and crossroads. Hecate inherited the prophetic abilities of her grandmother Phoebe and the intellectual depth of her grandfather Cus. So through his daughters and grandchildren, Cus influenced the world enormously. Apollo brought reason and prophecy to the Olympians. Artemis brought independence and strength. Hecate brought magic and mystery. But Cus himself remained in the background. He was the foundation that others built on. The Greeks valued intellect deeply. Philosophy, mathematics, logic, debate, these were central to Greek culture. They didn't just want to know things, they wanted to understand them. They wanted to ask why and how and what if. Cus represented that drive, the need to think, to question, to push beyond simple answers. He was also associated with the axis of the heavens, the invisible line around which everything rotated. This is deeply symbolic. Intellect is the axis around which understanding rotates. It's the central point that everything else refers back to. When the war came between Titans and Olympians, Cus fought on the Titan side. He lost and was imprisoned in Tartarus. There's a darker story about what happened next. In Tartarus, Cus went mad. The complete darkness, the eternal imprisonment, the absence of anything to think about, it broke his mind. He tried to escape, throwing himself against the bronze gates over and over, but he couldn't break through. He screamed, he raged, he lost himself. The Titan of intellect, driven to madness by the absence of anything to apply that intellect to. It's a tragic image. A brilliant mind with nothing to think about, trapped in darkness forever. But even from Tartarus, his legacy lived on. Every time someone asked a difficult question, that was Cus. Every time someone thought through a complex problem, that was his influence. Every time Apollo spoke a prophecy or Artemis outsmarted a hunter or Hecate revealed a hidden truth, that was Cus working through his descendants. The Greeks understood that intellect without freedom is torture. A mind needs problems to solve, questions to answer, ideas to explore. Lock that away, and the mind eats itself. Cus represents the best of what thinking can be. Not cold logic that ignores emotion, but rational thought that seeks truth. Not arrogance that claims to know everything, but humility that keeps asking questions. He didn't need to be loud or dramatic. He just needed to think, and through thinking, he helped shape the universe. His story is a reminder that some powers are invisible. You can't see intellect, you can't touch it, but it changes everything. It's the reason we have science, philosophy, art, civilization. Without the capacity for abstract thought, we're just animals reacting to stimuli. Cus gave the cosmos that capacity. He made thought possible. And even though he's imprisoned now, even though his name is mostly forgotten, every time you think deeply about something, every time you question the obvious answer and dig deeper, you're honoring him. The northern pillar still stands, the axis still turns, and somewhere in the darkness of Tartarus, Cus still thinks. Phoebe, the tightness of prophecy. Phoebe was the tightness of prophecy. oracles, and bright intellect. Her name means bright or radiant, and she was associated with the moon, with silver light, with a kind of knowledge that comes from beyond the rational mind. She married Cronus, the titan of intellect, and together they represented two types of knowing. Cronus was reason and logic. Phoebe was intuition and prophecy. One built arguments step by step. The other saw the truth in a flash of insight. Phoebe was one of the original oracles at Delphi, the most famous prophetic site in all of Greece. Before Apollo took over the oracle, it belonged to Gaia, the earth. Then it passed to Themis, the tightness of divine law, and then to Phoebe. At Delphi, there was a crack in the earth where vapors rose from deep underground. The priestess, called the Pythia, would sit above this crack, breathe in the vapors, and fall into a trance. In that state, she would speak prophecies. These weren't clear statements. They were riddles, fragments, puzzling phrases that could mean multiple things. But they came true, always, even when people tried to avoid them. Phoebe governed this process. She was the one who made prophecy possible. She opened the door between the present and the future, between what is and what will be. Later, she gave the oracle to her grandson Apollo as a birthday gift. Apollo became the god of prophecy, taking over Delphi and making it his sacred site. But the power came from Phoebe originally. Every prophecy Apollo spoke traced back to her. Phoebe and Cronus had two daughters, Leto and Asteria. Both inherited their mother's prophetic abilities and their father's intellect. Leto, as we mentioned, gave birth to Apollo and Artemis. Apollo inherited Phoebe's connection to prophecy and became the most famous oracle god in Greek mythology. He spoke the future at Delphi, and his words shaped the fates of kings and heroes. Artemis, his twin, inherited Phoebe's brightness and became associated with the moon. She hunted under moonlight, roamed through forests in the silver glow, and represented the wild, untamed aspect of feminine power. Asteria became the tightness of falling stars and nighttime prophecy. She could read the future in the stars, in their patterns and movements. This was different from her mother's oracle work. Phoebe spoke prophecies through priestesses. Asteria wrote them in the sky. Through these daughters and grandchildren, Phoebe's influence spread throughout Greek religion. Every oracle, every prophecy, every moment when someone glimpsed the future that came from her. The Greeks took prophecy seriously. They didn't see it as fortune-telling or entertainment. They believed the future was real, already written, and that certain people could see it. Kings consulted oracles before going to war. Individuals sought guidance for major life decisions. Cities built temples around prophetic sites. Phoebe made all of that possible. She was the bridge between time and eternity, between the present moment and everything that would come after. But prophecy was dangerous. Knowing the future didn't mean you could change it. In fact, trying to avoid a prophecy often caused it to come true. Oedipus tried to escape his fate and ran straight into it. Cronus tried to prevent his overthrow and created the very son who would defeat him. This is the paradox of prophecy. It gives knowledge, but not power. You can see what's coming, but you can't stop it. Phoebe understood this. She didn't offer prophecy as a gift. She offered it as a burden. Knowledge of the future is heavy. It changes how you see the present. Every choice becomes weighted with meaning because you know where it leads. The Greeks called this fate Moira, the unavoidable destiny that shapes every life. Phoebe could see it, could speak it, but couldn't change it. No one could. When the war came between Titans and Olympians, Phoebe didn't fight. She wasn't a warrior. She saw what was coming, knew the Titans would lose, and stepped aside. She wasn't imprisoned in Tartarus. She faded into the background, becoming more concept than person. But her presence remained. Every time the Pythia at Delphi breathed those vapors and spoke in riddles, that was Phoebe. Every time someone looked at the stars and wondered what they meant, that was her influence. Every time a prophecy came true, despite someone's best efforts to avoid it, that was her power at work. She represents something the Greeks understood deeply. The future is real. It exists somewhere, already written, already determined. We move through time like reading a book, one page after another, but the pages are already there. We're just discovering them. Phoebe could flip ahead. She could read the ending before anyone else, and she could whisper hints to those brave enough to ask. But knowing the ending doesn't make the story any easier. Sometimes it makes it harder. You see the tragedy coming and can't stop it. You watch yourself make the choices that lead to disaster, unable to choose differently because those choices are who you are. This is why prophecy is both gift and curse, both light and burden, both radiant and terrible. Phoebe, the bright one, the silver goddess, the speaker of futures, gave humanity the ability to glimpse what was coming. Whether that was kindness or cruelty depends on who you ask. But the oracle still stands. The prophecies still come true. And somewhere in the spaces between moments, Phoebe still watches, still knows, still sees everything that will be. Themis, the tightness of divine law. Themis was the tightness of divine law and order. Not human law, which can be changed or broken, but cosmic law. The fundamental rules that govern reality itself, the principles that gods and mortals alike must follow. Her name literally means that which is laid down or law. She was the embodiment of proper order, of things being as they should be, of the natural justice that exists independent of any court or judge. Themis was beautiful and severe. She carried a sword in one hand and scales in the other. The sword represented the power to enforce justice. The scales represented balance, fairness, weighing different claims to find the truth. You might recognize this image. It's the same symbol we use for justice today. The blindfolded woman with the sword and scales, that comes from Themis. She's the origin of our entire concept of justice as an impartial, balanced force. She had the gift of prophecy like Phoebe. She was one of the oracles at Delphi before Apollo, but her prophecies were different. They weren't about individual futures. They were about cosmic order, about what must happen to maintain balance in the universe. Themis married Zeus, not as his official wife, that was Hera, but as one of his earlier consorts, before the Olympian order was fully established. Their marriage represented the union of power and law. Zeus had the strength to rule. Themis had the wisdom to rule justly. Together they had important children, the Horae, goddesses of the seasons and natural order. Their names were Eunomia, good order, Dike justice, and Erin peace. These three maintained the proper functioning of society and nature. They also had the Moirai, the Fates, three sisters who controlled every life from birth to death. Clotho spun the thread of life, Lachesis measured it, Atropos cut it. Even Zeus couldn't overrule the Fates. Even the king of gods had to bow to the law they represented. Some stories say the Fates were older, daughters of Nyx, the night. But other stories make them daughters of Themis, which makes more sense. The fates weren't random. They followed rules. They maintained order. That's Themis's domain. Themis also served as Zeus's counselor. When he needed advice, when he faced difficult decisions, he went to Themis. She told him not what he wanted to hear, but what the law required, what cosmic justice demanded. She was present at the assembly of the gods, sitting beside Zeus's throne. When disputes arose, when gods argued over territory or honor or justice, Themis was the one who settled it. Her word was law because she was law. The Greeks believed that certain things were fundamentally right or wrong, not because a king said so, not because a law was written, but because the universe itself had an order. Killing a guest violated sacred hospitality. Breaking an oath violated trust. These weren't just social rules. They were cosmic violations. Themis enforced these principles. She didn't need an army or weapons. The universe itself bent toward her will. Break the sacred laws, and consequences would follow. Not immediately, perhaps. Not obviously, but inevitably. This is why the Greeks feared the Furies, daughters of the blood of Uranus, but connected to Themis's domain. The Furies hunted oath-breakers and murderers, especially those who killed family. They represented the inescapable consequence of violating divine law. You couldn't run from the Furies. You couldn't hide. They would find you eventually. That's what divine justice meant. Not quick or merciful, but certain. Themis also governed the cycles of nature. The seasons changed because that was proper order. Summer gave way to fall, fall to winter, winter to spring, spring to summer. This wasn't random, it was law. The Houri, her daughters, made sure these transitions happened smoothly. They opened and closed the gates of heaven to let the seasons through. They brought rain when it was time to plant and sun when it was time to harvest. Without Themis, chaos would reign. There would be no justice, no order, no predictability. The strong would devour the weak. Promises would mean nothing. The seasons would come randomly, if at all. She held the universe together through law, through the principle that actions have consequences, that balance must be maintained, that some things are simply right or wrong, regardless of who you are. When the war came between Titans and Olympians, Themis sided with Zeus. She saw that the old order under Cronus had become corrupt, maintained only through fear and violence. The new order, while imperfect, would at least establish clearer laws. Zeus valued her counsel so much that even after their romantic relationship ended, she remained part of his inner circle. She sat in the assemblies. She spoke at councils. She reminded the gods of their duties and their limits. Later, as Greek society developed, Themis became the patron of human law courts. Judges invoked her name. Lawyers appealed to her principles. The concept of justice as impartial, balanced, and independent came directly from her. She represents something beautiful in Greek thought. The belief that the universe has order, that justice isn't just what the powerful say it is, that there are fundamental rights and wrongs written into the fabric of reality. This gave people hope. Even if a king was unjust, even if the powerful got away with crimes, divine law still existed. Themis still watched, and eventually balance would be restored. Her scales still tip, her sword still falls, and the laws she laid down at the beginning of time still govern everything, whether we acknowledge them or not. Mnemosyne, the tightness of memory. Mnemosyne was the tightness of memory, not just the ability to remember things, but memory itself as a force, as power, as the foundation of knowledge and identity. Without memory, there is no past. Without past, there is no story. Without story, there is no meaning. Her name is where we get the word mnemonic, a device to help remember things. She was the living embodiment of remembering, of holding on to what has been, of preserving the past against the endless forward flow of time. The Greeks understood that memory was sacred. In a world without books, without writing for most of history, memory was how knowledge survived. Stories, songs, laws, histories, all of it lived in human memory. Lose the memory, and you lose everything. Mnemosyne held the memory of the cosmos. She remembered the birth of the world from chaos. She remembered the reign of Uranus. She remembered the castration, the rise of the Titans, every moment of cosmic history. Nothing was forgotten as long as Mnemosyne existed. She was beautiful and serene. She didn't fight or scheme. She simply remembered. But that was enough to make her powerful. Because the one who controls the past controls how we understand the present. Zeus came to her after he had defeated the Titans and established his rule. He wanted to ensure that his victory would be remembered correctly. He wanted songs and stories that would tell future generations about the war, about his triumph, about the new order. So he slept with Mnemosyne, not once, but 9 consecutive nights. This wasn't just lust, it was a ritual, a sacred act of creation. From that union, Mnemosyne gave birth to 9 daughters, the Muses. Each one governed a different form of art and knowledge. Calliope was the muse of epic poetry. She inspired the great poets who sang of heroes and gods. Clio was the muse of history. She preserved the record of what had actually happened. Erato was the muse of love poetry. She inspired songs of passion and desire. Euterpe was the muse of music and flute playing. She brought melody into the world. Melpomene was the muse of tragedy. She taught people to transform suffering into art. Polyhymnia was the muse of hymns and sacred poetry. She connected humans to gods through song. Terpsichore was the muse of dance. She showed how the body could express what words couldn't. Thalia was the muse of comedy. She reminded people that laughter was sacred too. Urania was the muse of astronomy. She helped humans understand the stars and planets. These 9 daughters carried their mother's gift. They were memory in action. They inspired poets to remember and retell the old stories. They helped historians record events. They made sure that nothing important was forgotten. Every ancient Greek poet began their work by invoking the Muses. Homer started the Iliad with "Sing, goddess, of the rage of Achilles." He wasn't talking to himself. He was calling on the Muses, daughters of Mnemosyne, to help him remember the story correctly. Hesiod, the other great early Greek poet, had a vision of the Muses while he was herding sheep. They appeared to him and breathed divine voice into him, giving him the ability to sing of the past and future. They specifically told him they knew how to tell lies that seemed true and truths that seemed like lies. This is important. The Muses, and by extension Mnemosyne, controlled not just memory but the story. They decided what version of events would be remembered. They could make lies seem true and truth seem false. This gave them enormous power. Whoever controls the story controls reality, at least as far as future generations are concerned. The war between Titans and Olympians could be remembered as a just rebellion against tyranny or as an ungrateful son's betrayal. The muses decided which version people would sing. Mnemosyne represents the Greek understanding that memory is not passive. We don't just record events like a camera. We shape them, interpret them, give them meaning. And in the process, we create the past. This is why memory was sacred. This is why the muses were so important. They didn't just help you remember, they helped you understand what the memory meant. Mnemosyne also had a darker aspect. The Greeks believed in Lethe, the river of forgetfulness in the underworld. When souls died and went to Hades, they drank from Lethe and forgot their past lives. This allowed them to be reborn without the burden of previous memories. Lethe was the opposite of Mnemosyne. When Mnemosyne preserved, Lethe erased. Both were necessary. Too much memory and you'd be paralyzed by the weight of the past. Too much forgetting and you'd lose yourself entirely. The mystery religions, secret cults that promised a better afterlife, taught initiates to avoid drinking from Lethe. Instead, they should drink from Mnemosyne's pool, maintaining their memories even in death. This would allow them to escape the cycle of rebirth and achieve true immortality. So Mnemosyne offered not just memory of the past, but continuity of self across death. She was the promise that you wouldn't be lost, wouldn't be forgotten, wouldn't disappear into nothing. After the war, Mnemosyne didn't fight. She wasn't imprisoned in Tartarus. She simply continued her work, remembering everything, preserving the past for those who would come after. Her daughters spread across the world, inspiring artists and poets, historians and musicians. Every time someone created something beautiful and lasting, that was the muses at work. And behind the muses was Mnemosyne, the mother of memory, making sure nothing truly important was ever lost. She represents something we still need today. In a world that moves so fast, that discards the old for the new constantly, memory is resistance. Remembering is an act of defiance against the erasure of time. Every story told is a prayer to Mnemosyne. Every song sung, every poem written, every history recorded. We fight against forgetting because some things matter too much to lose. And somewhere, in the space between past and present, Mnemosyne still remembers, still holds every moment that has ever been, still whispers to those who will listen, helping them remember who they are and where they came from. Because without memory, we have no identity. Without the past, we have no future. And without Mnemosyne, we have neither. That's the 12 original Titans, the 6 sons and 6 daughters of Uranus and Gaia who ruled the cosmos before the Olympians. Each one represented something fundamental: time, fertility, water, light, mortality, stars, intellect, prophecy, law, and memory. Together, they built the structure of reality. They established the rules that even gods must follow. They created the framework that everything else would build on. Their reign ended in war and imprisonment, but their legacy continued through their children and grandchildren. The Olympians might have taken power, but they inherited a world shaped by the Titans. And in many ways, the Titans are still here. Every river that flows, every star that shines, every memory that persists, every law that holds. That's the Titans working through the fabric of reality itself. They're not gone, they're foundational. And foundations, even when buried, continue to hold everything up.